Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about the struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Christina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Christina Schmidt. Today, I have a very amazing guest on. His name is Jack Beers, and Jack is the founder of the Catholic Mentor. So the Catholic Mentor is an organization dedicated to revealing and removing immovable obstacles, preventing you from experiencing the deep meaning and lasting impact through an integration of sound psychology and authentic Catholic spirituality. I cannot speak today. So, Jack,
it's a mouthful. I wrote a mouthful, didn't I?
It's honestly the title of my podcast. I can sometimes not say it either. So I totally get it. So Jack, welcome. So happy to have you on.
I'm so glad to get to be here. I know that we've scheduled and rescheduled a few times, so I'm grateful for your grace and happy to be here with you now.
Oh, not a problem at all. Life gets in the way, and that's okay. That's part of it. All right. Well, just why don't you give the listeners an introduction to yourself? Just so you can tell us about your family, and then tell us a little bit about your business.
Sure. Yeah. So I live just south of Cincinnati with my wife and 3 kids. I've got a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and then a 3-month-old. So we've got the Beers household is a zoo these days, and it is full of joy and tears and big emotions and big fun and all kinds of good stuff. I spent the first 10 years of my professional career in nonprofit leadership, working outside of the church and in the nonprofit world, and really building out content that helps people grow in their faith. That's primarily what I was doing. But a lot of that time was also spent in organizational leadership. So a lot of producing content involves managing people. And if you've ever managed creatives, you know that it is the equivalent of herding cats. So it is an adventure. It is difficult and it's challenging. And as a creative, I probably know better than most about how difficult we can be. And so I'm excited to apply a lot of what I've learned here in a professional context with you. A lot of what I do is spent in one-to-one in walking with people. Mm-hmm. Whenever I start working with someone or a group of people, I always begin with one of my favorite quotes. It's from Fred Rogers. And he said that who you are on the inside is what helps you make and do everything in life. Mm. So who you are on the inside is what helps you make and do everything in life. You'll hear a lot in business terms and business phrases, things like, we want you to have work-life balance because we know that when you have something happen to you at home, it impacts you at work. Mm-hmm. So if your marriage isn't going well because you work all the time, we don't want that because it's going to negatively impact your work and it's going to negatively impact the organization. So, we want you to be successful. Well, that's essentially what they're saying, right? They're saying that who you are on the inside, which is impacted by a multitude of factors, is what helps you be good or bad or somewhere in between at your job. So if you are able to have a healthy inner life and healthy relationships, then you're going to be your most productive, best self when you come to the office, and that's what we want. So I really help people become who they are, as one of my heroes, John Paul II, would say. And that's really trying to maximize their potential and overcome inner obstacles. So we dive deep into what prevents people from actually bringing their best selves to work, what actually prevents them from bringing their best selves into their relationships, and into their relationship with loved ones, with children, with coworkers, with bosses, ultimately with God as well.
Oh,
and just help them identify and then overcome those obstacles. So that's essentially what I do.
that's so awesome. It ties in so well with what I do as well. And so I'm so happy to bring you on and present you to my listeners as well, because as leaders, like we just we lead from our wounds. We lead from all of those places of hurt as well. And so we bring all of that with us. And it's so important to be able to figure out what those things are and suss them out in some way, right? Like just
Yes.
deal with them, heal them, understand what they are. And so I love the work that you're doing to help people do that, because it's bringing about a greater society for us. And that's really what we need, greater society pointing us towards where we need to go. So,
I remember when I was working with someone, she was young, second job out of college, really, really young. And I remember sitting with her sitting in front of me, basically being like, I have to quit. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I have to quit. It's my final decision and I have to leave. And being like, what is happening right now? Like, where did this come from? This doesn't seem real. And it's so hard when you're in a leadership position and you know that somebody is doing something out of nowhere and absurd and counterproductive to their goals and who they want to be. And it's like, what is going on? And it's really essential as a leader to be able to have the tools to draw out of that person. Like, hey, why don't you back up a few steps? You're kind of blocking me from understanding where you're at. Let's back up a few steps. Like, how did we get here? What's going on? Like, how did you reach this decision? What factors are playing in getting here? What is it that I've done that's contributed to this conversation right now? And giving someone space to be able to speak and let their inner world emerge, because otherwise, direct reports can drive you insane. They can literally drive you insane if you don't have that skill set and the ability to let who they really are emerge. Because otherwise, they do all kinds of crazy things.
they do. It's wonderful, but it's what makes us us. So,
Yeah, it does. And we're all direct reports in some capacity, right?
exactly.
So there's always someone who thinks that about us too. Yeah.
Exactly. We drive someone insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So, I mean, I feel like we could go in so many different directions with this whole thing, but I would love to just focus a little bit on healing. So, how does healing help your clients, and why is that an important aspect of what you do?
Yeah. Well, if you think about the opposite, right? If you are healing, if you are not healed, if you are not whole, right? You are broken. So anything that tries to operate while broken operates painfully, operates in a way that takes way more energy than it should to accomplish basic tasks, and is just miserable. Like if you think about a car that doesn't have a brake system, that can't stop, uh, that car is going to have to crash in order to stop. It is going to have to run into things in order to stop. It doesn't work. It's not functioning. And it can't actually perform its primary duty, which is to safely transport you from point A to point B, because it doesn't have any brakes. The equivalent is true for human beings. A human being without brakes is a human being who can't say no. And I know that you know people who can't say no. You may even be a person who can't say no, people who can't say no, who are constantly on the go and who are saying yes all of the time, not because they're free, but because they are lost and because they are broken. What happens is that people end up saying, who do that, who say yes constantly, they get resentful of the person who keeps asking them to do things. So when you can't give a free yes to something, you become resentful of the person who's asking, and it builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. So healing is really important because you want a car that has breaks, just like you want to be a person who can set boundaries and who knows how to say, let their yes be their yes and their no be their no. Because if you're not free to say no to something, you're certainly not free to say yes to it. So healing is really important for that reason. And then healing is also really important because as human beings, we're made to give and receive love. And a lot of people will look at healing as something, John Paul II would talk about this. He would be like, healing isn't fixing what's broken. Healing is loving what's broken. When you love someone in such a way that heals the areas that they're broken, they actually become a lot stronger, a lot more capable, a lot more effective. And so, this is the work of God. This is the work of God's people. And this is everybody's primary purpose, which is to become whole, so that you can give and receive love. So, I mean, it's a big question, and I hopefully I made it somewhat specific and then brought it up to the larger thing, which is like, well, if you're broken, you can't give and receive love. If you can't give and receive love, then you're not going to be happy. And if you're not going to be happy, you're going to make other people unhappy because you're unhappy. And if you're unhappy and you're making other people unhappy, they're going to make you more unhappy. And then it's this vicious cycle of unhappiness. So maybe that's a different way of putting it.
It's a wonderful way to put it.
Just hurt people. Those phrases mean something for a reason, right? Yeah. Those phrases mean something for a reason.
Yeah. No. And it does have such a huge impact on, like you were saying, the ability to love, but really that ability to have any kind of relationship whatsoever. Like it's going to seep in, all these hurts or this lack of healing is going to seep into all of our relationships, whether they're work, friends, our relationship with God. Like it's all impacted by the lack of healing. So
let me give you a good example of this, and people are listening, a good example of this. So there's something in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT therapy, where they talk about how we as human beings think that we respond to things based on events. Mm-hmm. So it's called like A-B response. We assume that we respond to things A to B. Like we're driving down the road and someone cuts us off. And then when we flip them off or we cuss them out or we give them a hard time or try to, bump their car or whatever, people ask, why are you doing that? Well, because they cut us off. That's why I'm doing it. And it's not true. Psychologically speaking, it's actually not true. We don't actually respond to things A to B. Our boss asks us to work on a Saturday, and our response is to like, talk poorly about him behind his back, right? Well, why are you talking poorly behind his back about him? Well, because he's asking me to work on Saturday. That's not true. That's not actually why you're talking poorly behind his back. Mm-hmm. It's actually the ABCs of response. So A, an event happens. B, based on our track record history, or in this case, our level of brokenness, we assign meaning to that event. And then we respond based off of the meaning that we've placed on it. So you're driving down the road, you get cut off. The meaning that I might assign to it is, this person is telling me I'm unimportant and I need to let them know that I matter. Mm-hmm. Right? Or my boss tells me I have to work on Saturday, but he never asked me what I was doing on the weekend. So I feel really unseen and I want to be seen and I want to be appreciated. So I need to take out my anger somewhere else and be seen by someone else who can look at me and go, I'm so sorry, your boss sucks. Because then I actually feel seen. Mm-hmm. You don't have to flip someone off when they cut you off. You don't have to gossip about your boss behind your boss's back. Mm-hmm. You don't have to do those things. You're only doing them because of the meaning you assign. So if the lens by which you view the events of your life are through a lens of fear and protectedness, self-protection, you're going to then respond to the events of life through that lens. Mm-hmm. And so if you can heal that lens by which you view the world, you then actually begin to view things and receive things for what they truly are. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. In my training, we talk a lot about like the thoughts, feelings, behaviors, results sort of wheel that will generate. And it's a very similar to that from what you're saying, but I like that you've associated a meaning to it because it makes you think about it differently. Because we all know we have beliefs, we have these ingrained thoughts, we learn these these routines when we're children, and they continue to repeat themselves, these programs that we've got. But when you say we've assigned a meaning to it, that it's something, when you said that, I was like, yes, that's what it is, because we've assigned some kind of meaning to somebody asking us to work on Saturday instead of just saying they need work. They need someone to work. They need me to work. I can say yes or no to that, and I can do what I will with that. So yeah, so I like that. I'm gonna steal that.
It's exactly why you can change directions as an organization, and you can give the same message to 50, 100, 200, 1,000 people, and you get so many different interpretations of it. You get so many different points of feedback. It's because of the meaning that each person is assigning to it that is often unique to them.
Yes.
And what you're dealing with isn't actually reality. It's this subjective space of assigned meaning. And if you don't understand the lens with which people view things, then,
you can't help them get over it. That's really
no,
or get through it or work with it, I guess, is the other way.
You can't change how they view it, right? You can't change their lens.
Yeah. So a lot of the work that I do is I'm trying to teach leaders to do this with people, to help, okay, so someone is struggling with this work. All right, let's back into those thoughts or those feelings. So let's back into the stories we're telling ourselves around what happened there. Let's see if you've got, how would you help somebody do that in a way that doesn't make them feel scared to do it? Because that's what I hear a lot. It's like they're afraid of getting there with people. They're afraid of going that deep with their team. So what would you tell them? How would you convince them to not be afraid to do that?
Yeah. At the highest level, what I share with people is you're responsible for effort and integrity. You're not responsible for outcomes. So you don't shoulder the burden of whatever person in front of you is carrying and whether or not they end up getting on board or not. It's not ultimately your responsibility. You have to put forth the best effort that you can, the most honest, full of integrity, sincere, genuine effort. But you don't control their free will. They have to make whatever decision that they need to make. So a lot of people take over responsibility. They think if I go into that conversation, then that person's problem is my problem. Then fixing that problem moves from their shoulders to my shoulders. And it's just not, that's just not true. That's a boundary violation. Outcomes are God's territory, not my territory, not your territory. So you have a certain responsibility, which is to do your best to help this person be their best without actually shouldering the burden of responsibility. And then the other part is you don't have to do much. People, generally speaking, not everyone, but people generally are craving for an environment to share and a place of encouragement to be received in. So you, generally speaking, for most people, now there are certain pathologies, there are certain types of people where this isn't the case, but for most people, giving someone space to articulate themselves and communicate themselves and not trying to solve their problem, but trying to help them feel heard and then encouraged while sticking with the bottom line of what needs to happen is all that needs to occur. So let me make that practical for you. So someone, let's just use the working on Saturday, right? Hey, I want, you need to come in and work on Saturday. We as a whole organization are coming in. I'm going to be coming in. I know, sorry, this is late notice, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And the employee is sitting there and is all this negative body language, right? Really loud body language, but no words are being spoken. And you decide you want to talk with them about it after. All you really need to do is make what I call a process comment, which is observing the dynamic between you and that other person and just defining it. So it's like, Christina, I noticed that when I was talking, you were giving off a lot of body language vibes that maybe this wasn't a great thing, that maybe this is a point of frustration for you. Am I reading that right? And then you just let it hang, right? You just let it be. And it's awkward and difficult and the person might be resisting and you just keep making process comments. Feels like you might be avoiding what I'm asking you. And just letting it be and letting the space be. And it can be very awkward, but you're not trying to therapize them. You're not trying to solve their problem. You're just identifying the dynamic between the two of you and inviting that person to speak into it. And most of the time they'll accept it. Some of the time they'll continue to resist. And if they continue to resist, you just say, okay, well, I really care about you and I really care about the work. And it doesn't change that we have to come in on Saturday. So if you have more thoughts you want to share at some point, I'm here. But most of the time they're going to respond. Like, yeah, I'm really frustrated. I really don't think that I should be working on Saturday, right? I'm really angry about it. Tell me about that. Is something going on? Was there something really important on Saturday for you? And you're just inquiring. You're not solving. You're not trying to be their mom. You're not offering them tissues. You're just like, okay, and giving them space and then hearing them and then reaffirming the decision, right? Like that is all that your job is.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? When you hear that, are you like, no way, you're missing all these pieces? What do you think?
Oh gosh, no, I mean, you're doing it better than than I am, but it is that you're bringing out their feelings, you're letting them be heard. You're not solving the problem with them, and I think that that's like a lot of times leaders will come in and they think they have to be the problem solvers for everybody, and because they were maybe promoted from being the problem solver, they were great at problem solving, so they got promoted up. Or I know in my case, I had probably like a imposter syndrome form or something when I first became a leader. It was like, oh, I have to prove I know what I'm talking about, so I better answer all the questions. So I tended to over answer questions, or try to solve everybody's problem because that's my innate nature. I like to fix it. Right. But it's one of those, yeah, it's not about solving the problems, it's not about giving in, and it's not about taking it all on yourself, and I think that's maybe the scary part.
Yeah. I would always try to control other people's perception of the situation as well.
Oh yeah, I probably
that was yeah. So the imposter syndrome for sure with me. And then in the beginning, I would try to control a lot of what people's perception was. Like, look, it's not actually that bad on Saturday because it's going to be this great team thing, and it's going to be this, and it's going to be that, and it's going to be awesome. And and I would obsess over whether or not this person was going to come to work happy on Saturday instead of being who that person needed you to be in that moment and giving them a chance to speak. Because most of the time people don't necessarily want you to solve their problem. They just want you to see them, right?
Exactly. And the result of just being what they need versus trying to give in to them or trying to convince them to be happy about it is so much better. Like if you're just what they need, that you just were that voice, they're going to feel better. You're going to get what you need, which is them to come in Saturday or whatever it is. And that relationship's going to be better. So
and you're the leader,
all around.
right? And you're the leader. And part of the burden of leadership sometimes is that you deliver bad news and that people get to be mad at you. And that's okay. If you have their back and you communicate clearly and you genuinely listen to them and care about them, in the long run, they are going to love working with you. It's like sometimes it's a lot like parenting a 3-year-old. 3-year-olds love testing boundaries, right? They love testing boundaries and they're constantly challenging you and all these things. If you create a house of no rules and you're constantly giving in to a 3-year-old, the 3-year-old will not respect you. They will terrorize you and they will be miserable. But the 3-year-old, when you give them rules and you stick to it and you say things like, it's okay for you to be frustrated. It's not okay for you to punch your brother in the face. Or it's okay for you to be frustrated. It's not okay for you to gossip about your teammates behind their back. Like they will be mad at you, but damn it, they'll respect you. And they will thrive under the rules, right? Because you care, you were there, you stood firm in your ground, but you provided them a venue and a context for which they can thrive. Like it's the job of a therapist to heal people. It's not the job of the leader, Like if it's that bad, they should have a therapist or a mentor or somebody who is going to sit there and help them work through their childhood trauma. You're their boss. You're not qualified to do that. Don't do that. That's not your responsibility to do that, but you can listen.
Yes. Love that. just making that space for them and letting them get something off their chest. And then, okay, and we're working Saturday. Great.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'd love to take that into consideration next time. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's
Did
great.
you put your Jimmy John's order in for Saturday yet?
It was always donuts. We always had to bring donuts.
Right.
Love
I'm
it.
bringing coffee. Make sure you get me your order by 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So a lot of where this becomes difficult for leaders is because they're carrying some of their own baggage with them, and so they're having a hard time dealing with it because they've not dealt, like dealing with other people because they've not dealt with their own things. So if you were to give somebody
Sure.
some first steps to kind of start embarking on that, what would you tell a leader to do?
Well, first off, leadership is very lonely. There's really nowhere for you to go, depending on where you're at in the organization. There's the higher you get, the fewer places there are for you to be taken care of, and you need that. Everybody needs that. So I think the first thing that I like to tell leaders is that it's okay for you to have needs. It's okay that you need someone to take care of you from time to time. You don't have to be Superwoman. You don't have to be Superman. You don't have to be invincible in order to be a leader. And it is very normal and appropriate and healthy for you to require some sort of outlet to process through the ups and downs of leading flawed human beings as a flawed human being.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't take your stuff out on your kids. I mean, you can, but it's not good.
It's not a good plan.
Right? It's not a good plan. Just like a leader, you can't take your stuff out on the people who report to you. You can't do it. At least if you want a productive, healthy culture, you can't take out your pathology on them. Everybody needs that from time to time. And the other thing is, you cannot do it on your own. You can after you've walked with somebody for a bit and they've helped you see yourself. Like I am really, really, really good at helping people identify inner obstacles and how to get over it. I can do it really, really fast. Like right now, if you and I wanted to go deep, in 45 minutes, I can help you identify something it's been taking you years and years to figure out. I can do that. I'm really good at it, well trained at it. For the life of me, I can't do it for myself. All right. So I say all that not because I'm trying to boost myself. I'm just like, as human beings, we can't see our own stuff. I'll give you a practical example of this. I had a friend of mine. It was a mess, but we were co-leading an organization, right? We were co-leading.
Well,
Good Lord, it was hard, right? Just leave it at that.
yes.
And my wife and I had our first child. And he was like, look, when you have your first child, you think you're acting normal and you think you're the same person. And for the first 3 to 6 months, you are not. You are a slightly crazy, exhausted, overwhelmed version of yourself. And you will have no visibility to it. So I advise you to listen to me as you're going through it. I will help you and I will help you see things you can't see. And he was 100% right.
Oh my God.
It was like 8 weeks in and I was like, no, it's totally fine. I'm seeing this totally clearly. I'm being totally normal. I am totally myself.
Mm-hmm.
And he just reflected me back to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're totally right.
Wow. I wish I had him around my first one.
Right. He was just like, you can't see it. It's impossible to see. And we're all walking around that until we get a sense of how to navigate our own inner world. All of the spiritual masters, all of them had spiritual directors for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We all need that. We all need a great coach. We all need a great mentor who helps us see ourselves. So, in summary, yeah, like y'all need it. Everybody needs it, and you can't do it yourself.
There you go. Love it. All right. Well, this has been so much fun and so insightful. And I know I gained some insights and some tips. So I know my listeners will as well. So thank you so much for joining us and just giving us some of your perspectives, some of your life lessons. I just love it and appreciate it. If people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
They can do so through jackbeers.com if they want to. That's a place where you can bring me in as a speaker. You can follow me. I do like a weekly newsletter thing, and that just shares content like this, video content like this. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. I post a lot via LinkedIn. I think that's how we found each other there, Christina. Yeah, so those are usually the spaces where you can find me. It's been great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Been very, very informative, and I loved it. So thank you so much. And I will see you next time on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit christinaschmidt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.